what is going to happen between now and Inauguration Day? Because there is, as I mentioned, so much nervousness around that area.
Well, I mean, I don't have any particular insight into what's going to be happening on the ground in D.C. I think your reporter there on the ground is going to have far more of that than I do have a daughter who lives on Capitol Hill, and she told me she was out running yesterday, and that, as your reporter indicated, the area at that point, 5 blocks out from the Capitol, was essentially a fortified zone. And of course, that's unbelievably heartbreaking for anyone who loves this country. But hopefully we'll get through this and get President-elect Biden inaugurated and try to begin to move on to the next stage. In terms of the impeachment process, that too is plugging along, although we don't know exactly when the second part of it, which is to say the trial in the Senate, will begin.
Could he pardon himself, and can he run for office again?
As to the potential of self-pardon, in my view, that is not constitutionally permissible. But having said that, it's not ever been tested, frankly, because nobody's ever tried. It would be an act of remarkable gall and effrontery by Mr. Trump, but he's not short of either one of those qualities. I think it is something that would be challenged if he were to try to do it, but he may try it anyway. As to whether or not he could run again for office, if he were to be convicted in the Senate trial, which requires a 2/3 majority of the Senate and thus 17 Republicans to vote for his conviction, thereafter there will be a vote for whether or not he would be disqualified from ever again holding any federal office, including, of course, the presidency. And if you were to get an affirmative on both of those two votes, he could not run again in 2024.
Professor, Donald Trump permanently was banned from Twitter this week. In your opinion, was that the right thing to do?
Well, not my area. I think in his particular case, at this particular moment, given that he's used that platform essentially to incite and also to raise questions about the legitimacy of a perfectly well-conducted and valid election, it's certainly not a bad idea at all to have him not be able to use that vehicle to cause problems over the over the next week or two. I think going forward, it does raise some difficult questions. I mean, in an environment in which public communication is so heavily dominated by a few private platforms, a lot of people raise questions about whether or not those de facto monopolies should exercise the ability to shut off communication, particularly from public figures. But that's a debate for another day. Right now, I think at least most Americans would simply like to get us through to a new regime and then try to deal in more detail with the challenges that Donald Trump's legacy leaves us with.
That was going to be my next question. 4 days left in office. What sort of legacy will the US president leave behind, do you think?
Well, for his supporters, many of them think he's done wonderful things. I disagree with virtually all of his policies, but that's the kind of thing that kind of disagreement is incumbent in any transfer of power. But I think the more poisonous legacy is plainly what you see right in front of you here. The sad thing about the folks standing on the Capitol lawn and who later stormed the Capitol is that they were convinced by Trump, his allies in the media, and sadly with the complicity of many people who are inside of that building that you see, that is to say, legislators, Republican legislators, they're convinced that the election was stolen. Now, that's not true. It's a lie. But so long as that lie remains alive and believed by many millions of Americans, which sadly at the moment it does, then we have a cancer in our body politic, and we've got to figure out some way to deal with it, or we're going to be suffering from many awful consequences for years to come.
What do you think happened with the security? Why wasn't it as ramped up as it should have been?
I don't have any knowledge about that, and I certainly wouldn't want to speculate. Not my area of expertise.
Yeah, we're just seeing on screen the vision there of what happened in January 6th. So moving forward to the Inauguration Day, the National Ball has been closed down for a number of days, as we saw before with Sally Lockwood, who's on the ground in Washington, just those empty streets. But do you think, looking ahead, do you think we're going to have a peaceful transition?
If you mean, will Joe Biden be able to take the oath of office and with little, if any, interruption in Washington, D.C., I think yes. I mean, if for no other reason than the massive show of force. But, I mean, consider the tragedy here. I mean, I'm 65 years old. I've been through, many presidential transitions, and the Inauguration Day in the United States is traditionally and has always been a great celebration of the strength of our democracy and the not only peaceful, which is certainly a minimal requirement, but the celebratory transfer of power, from one democratically elected president to another. To look at this now is just heartrending. Now, and I hope it's the last time we ever see such a thing. Now, might some of Trump's supporters in other places other than Washington cause trouble? Sadly, they may. But I certainly hope not. I certainly hope that kind of thing is minimal and that there's no further violence or loss of life, and that we can return to a place where, the party that loses an election is sad, but simply resolves to work harder the next time to convince more people to join in their views. That's the future we need to look to.
Let's hope that happens. So President-elect Joe Biden announced his vaccine rollout plan yesterday, and that includes 100 million jabs in the first 100 days. Do you think this is achievable?
Again, you're asking the wrong guy. I'm not a public health expert, so I couldn't tell you.
All right. Well, let's hope. We've got the $1.9 trillion US economic aid package also coming on board. So certainly some positive things to look out for. But what will you be looking at mostly between now and Inauguration Day, Professor?
Well, because of my peculiar area of interest and expertise, which is constitutional matters and impeachment, I'm going to be focused on that side of things. But the truth is, I'm hopeful that once we get through the impeachment process, however it goes, that we will be able to focus on what is, after all, at least certainly in the near term, and to most people going around day to day, the most important thing, not only in our country, but in yours. I mean, making sure that this plague is brought under control, that the economic consequences can be, if not completely undone, then ameliorated, that we can get back to leading a more normal, productive, collaborative life together. So I was just hoping for that and keeping my fingers crossed.
Yes, we're crossing our fingers here as well. And finally, what are your thoughts on Mitch McConnell? Why is his vote so crucial?
It's critical, of course, because he is, until the 20th, when two more Democratic senators will join the Senate and make the split between Republicans and Democrats in the Senate 50-50, which under the American Constitution means that any ties are broken by the vice president, which is to say Kamala Harris. Until that happens, until we both have a 50-50 split and a new vice president, Mitch McConnell controls at least the floor agenda of the Senate, and nothing can move one way or another. He will remain in, as far as I know, in position of the Republican leader, even when they effectively go into the minority. And therefore, his position is one of immense influence within the Republican Party. He has, of course, allied himself, largely, I think, for practical reasons, not due to any particular affection with Mr. Trump over the last 4 years. I think he's deeply outraged by what happened on the 6th, deeply offended that an institution that he's worked for so long was penetrated and defiled. And I think he also is, of course, well, I don't want to speculate too much, but one imagines that he sees the future of the Republican Party as being better if the influence of Mr. Trump can, to some extent, be cleansed from it, and that it becomes once again more of a party of policy and less of a party of personality. Whether he will, in the end, make a public announcement in favor of a vote to convict and thus bring along more Republicans with him, I think remains to be seen. As far as I know, Senator McConnell is a carefully calculating man, and most of his calculations involve political advantage.